All right, if you're anything like me, you hate running out of food on a trip. It's like a big fear, and so I'm a big fan of snacks during an adventure, and one of my absolute favorite go-to snacks are wonderful pistachios. You may be familiar with pistachios and the brand Wonderful Pistachios, but if you're not, they are one of the highest protein nuts out there. 1 ounce serving of Wonderful Pistachios is 6 grams of protein. That's 10% of your daily value. It also includes 9 essential amino acids, and they come with a ton of different flavors, varieties. There's a spicy version, there's lightly salted, there's no salted, there's so many, and every time I go on an adventure, I'm not even lying, I take an entire bag with me. And what's cool too, I love having the Wonderful Pistachio in shell, because then that almost gives me something to do and focus on as I'm paddling or biking through the really monotonous parts of the adventure. Every great adventure is going to have plenty of boring moments, and it's nice to have something to do and also something that is giving you some fuel, like Wonderful Pistachios. So they're one of my favorite adventure snacks, favorite road trip snacks, and definitely leave me feeling better than a lot of other snacks you can turn to. So if you want to learn more about how to fuel your next adventure with Wonderful Pistachios, go to wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Hey folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. My name is Mason, and I'm your host. You'll notice we didn't have an episode last week. I should have announced that sooner, but I was traveling with work, working on another cool project called Inches to Miles, and that's a documentary that I helped to bring into the world. I didn't do any of the filming or anything. I was just more of the coordinator and helped with the team and find the story and all that. But anyway, it's something I've been working on for the past year pretty heavily. Well, it's out in the world now, and I that's through my day job at Athletic Brewing, non-alcoholic craft beer. And we made this cool documentary about our community of ambassadors in this really neat adventure they did. It is an adventure. It's a triathlon, but they were training. And really the whole documentary is about the backstory of these 3 athletes and as they overcome life's challenges to accumulation of racing Ironman Lake Placid together, which is one of the hardest and most prestigious Ironman challenges, triathlons in the world. Well, that in the documentary is awesome. It's so professionally done. It's on YouTube. There is a link in the show notes to go watch it. It's a little over an hour. It's like an hour, 10 minutes. I encourage you to go watch it. It was awesome, and that's what I've been working on. So that took me out of town last week. We did a screening up near our brewery in Connecticut, and I just ran out of time. I could not get a podcast episode done. So that's the delay. And also, I want to tell you, this past weekend, we did another Swamp Drifters adventure. That's where me and my friends and whoever else wants to go goes and does a Friday night to a Sunday evening adventure, nearly 48 hours, and we go paddle somewhere in the backwoods, black waters of Florida, and it was awesome. We were on the Ocklawaha River. We did really high up in the origin of the Ocklawaha, way up in the watershed, and did this awesome paddle, almost 30 miles. There were springs, there were manatees and otters and gators and snakes and fish. Beautiful, beautiful paddle. And we camped and cooked food. It was fantastic. And so I'm literally just now getting back from that, exhausted as all get out. But man, that was soul giving. And I do those every 2 months. That's kind of my adventure cadence right now, is every 2 months I plan these with friends. And what's so great is there's always new people on them. So you've got your folks that are there for every trip. And then you got the folks that are, this is the first time they're doing something like this. And it is just awesome to watch people's eyes open to all the possibility out there that is adventure. And so I encourage you. That's one of the things we talk about a lot here is sharing your knowledge, sharing your love of adventure with others. There is something about bringing others with you that is so fulfilling. And yes, of course, you should still do your solo trips if that's what fills you up. I still like to do things by myself, but I like to balance it now with taking others. So thank you so much for the break. I really needed it, and I wish I just would have announced it so that y'all knew it was coming. But today's episode is so cool. It's a little different, and it's also from my other show at Athletic Brewing called Without Compromise. Matt Knaggs is one of our ambassadors at Athletic Brewing, and a handful of years ago, like 2019, he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And we're going to talk about that. Someone who's really healthy, in a great place in life, having a great time, to have this unavoidable, unforeseen circumstance that now determines their future in a lot of ways, this unavoidable reality. And so all of us will probably face something like this in the future. And Matt shares some great advice, some great just pointers on how to deal with it and how to stay positive and how to get through those and make it a really incredible part of your story. As we've learned through so many people, life will have challenges. Life will have things. It might not be MS for you. It might be something happens to someone you love, something happens to you, gosh, or you're just tired of the way life is going. You want to make a change. So Matt's a great example of what do we do? And we do feature stories like this from time to time, but what you're going to learn about Matt is he's, beating the odds in so many ways. And he's doing this really cool challenge later this week, actually, he's starting, of running across Iowa and Nebraska for a relay race across the U.S. So he's going to be doing a portion of that adventure, something that all his doctors said he would not be able to do at this point in his diagnosis, but he's doing it. And so I found it hugely inspiring. I found him to be quite the light in his community. So this was a real treat to talk to him. So I hope you enjoy. I hope you follow along his journey. He's going to be posting about it on Instagram. And my goodness, this might be a new record for an intro, almost 6 minutes. I usually only talk for a couple. But thank you so much. So many good things happening. Sorry I didn't post last week. And let's go ahead and dive into Matt's story. Well, Matt Knaggs, welcome to the podcast, whichever one we're on.
Thanks. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah, man. Well, where are you coming from today?
So I am just outside of Toledo, Ohio.
Okay. Is that where you're from?
So originally I grew up just across the border from Toledo in Michigan. So I'm a Michigander at heart. Toledo is literally 5 minutes across the state line into Ohio.
Sweet. Oh, and that's why you're asking about Ann Arbor, because that's pretty close.
Exactly. It's about 45 minutes away.
What?
You got it.
Okay.
I love visuals for podcasts. I put up my hand and I say, this is where it is. So you just have to imagine it, but we're doing it.
Imagine your hand in the bottom right. That's where you're from. Well, cool. So, take us through, you've got a pretty wild story, and, I don't know if you get tired of telling it, but I really wanted to ask about dealing with MS and when this came about. But I want to talk about, what was Matt like before this? Because I want to talk about that change, talk about what's happened. But what kind of things were you into? What was your life like prior to this discovery?
Yeah, I don't get tired of talking about it because I love raising awareness about it. So I really appreciate you asking. If I go way back, so 20 plus years ago, I had this dream of becoming a bodybuilder, competitive bodybuilder. And so while I was in college, I started doing tons of heavy weightlifting. And along with that goes a lot of eating, right? So you're eating a ton to support the amount of exercise that you're doing. But shortly into that process, I got mono, and it was really bad, right? So I was bedridden with mono, but still eating as though I was competitive bodybuilding, right? So this is kind of significant to the story for two reasons. One, there is now research that shows that Epstein-Barr virus, there's a strong correlation between getting that, which is the virus that actually is the precursor to mono, and getting diagnosed with MS. So that is maybe the beginning of my MS journey, but also it's what led to my love of running. So maybe 9 months after becoming bedridden, and then, kind of getting out of that, the doctor said, hey, you can start doing things again. I realized very quickly I was 275 pounds and
all muscle, right?
No more. No. When I was training for bodybuilding, I was about 210, pretty muscular, but I gained, 60-ish pounds of not muscle by spending that time in bed and eating way too much.
Were you just used to that? Like that was your appetite had just grown to that point? Were you aware like I'm eating way too much right now?
It was kind of an afterthought, honestly.
Mm.
I was just so used to it, and I had so much hunger all the time because, like you said, you get used to a certain amount of eating because of training. So I'm eating like 4,000 calories a day, maybe more, and then that's how hungry I was even when I wasn't working out. And over time, obviously, the weight shot up. I remember one day I was walking up the stairs to class because at the time I was in college, and I was just going up one flight of stairs, and I was like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna have a heart attack and die." Like it is that bad. And I was only in my early 20s. I was like, I'm not even gonna make it to 30. So I decided I need to do something about it, and I started running. So running started for me as a I need to get healthy, I need to lose weight. And I went from 275 pounds down to about 180 in the matter of a year, which sounds really aggressive and fast. It probably was, to be honest. But ever since that time, pre-MS diagnosis, Matt, I really enjoyed running. I fell in love with the stress relief aspect of it, or just being outside, being in nature. It was like, wow, I used to hate running when I was in high school doing like soccer, things like that. They'd make us run before practice. Like, this sucks. Who wants to do this? But as I got older, I really came to appreciate it. I tell people it's where I solve the world's problems, right? So I became a pretty avid casual runner, if there is such a thing. So I would run 4 or 5 days a week. And it wasn't until 2015 that I actually ran my first half marathon. From that point on, I did 1 to 2 a year, but I stuck to I'm only half crazy. I never want to do more than a half marathon. A half marathon is good enough. And kind of stayed on that track until 2019 is when I started exhibiting the symptoms of MS, which had a huge impact on life in general, and what I felt I could do and what I was afraid to do. So that's where things really started to change for me.
And where were you in life then? Were you happy? I don't know. Were you in a place that's like, life's good right now? What were your goals? Did you have a plan for what you wanted to do?
A plan for sure, right? Because for me, before that point, it was like my future is set in stone. I know I'm on an executive career path for the company I'm working for. I've got 3 kids. My wife and I want to travel the world, want to keep doing these races, right? Only half marathons. But yeah, I mean, as far as I was concerned, I had it all figured out. Life was good. And until it wasn't, right? We assume that our futures are set in stone, or that we know what the future holds for us, and we make decisions based on that. And you'll see that's kind of a theme throughout my story up until a little bit later as well. So yeah, it was just that was the norm, and I was satisfied with doing what I was doing up until that point.
So talk to us about what happened in 2019. What was kind of some of the first signs of this and that journey of figuring out? Because I'm sure it wasn't, totally obvious what was going on at first.
Yeah. The summer of 2019, I started getting all kinds of odd symptoms. I would suddenly get weak just for no reason whatsoever. I would lose my balance, which I've always been a clumsy guy, but like to be walking and just kind of fall to the side, like that never happened. Being just completely exhausted, kind of like that amount of tired, like where it's like I've been hit by a truck, it's just, and there's no reason for it. I'm sleeping, I'm eating fine. I was having vision problems. I would get really blurry vision and even get pain behind my eyes. And then, those were kind of the earlier symptoms. They developed into different sensations. like pins and needles that would come and go frequently, electrical zaps pulsating throughout my body. Eventually, it got to the point where I would go out to try and run, and I couldn't go more than a quarter of a mile without feeling the feeling of putting your finger in an electrical socket. If you've ever done that, that's what it felt like a huge electrical zap going from my neck all the way through down to my legs. And it would take all the strength out of me, where I was afraid I was going to fall when it happened. So it was this feeling of like, what the heck is wrong with me? I must be dying. And during this period, I'd gone to my doctor many times, been through many tests, and everything came up with, you're healthy, you're fine. Doctor kind of wrote things off as, you're stressed. My dad had passed away in September of 2019, so he said this is all coming from grief.
Was that unexpected? Was that, just
completely unexpected. He was 62, and he wasn't a healthy guy, but it was one of those things where nobody saw it coming. So I remember actually saying to my doctor quite angrily, when I look down, when I move my head downward, I feel electrical pulses go throughout my body. You can't tell me that that's because of grief. And he still had no answer for it. So eventually what happened, I had made multiple trips to the ER.
That's crazy, because this isn't like something no one's ever heard of. It's pretty, people know what MS is. It wasn't like, oh, 1 in a billion people have this. Like, where was some of the prognosis going? Was it like, okay, it might be this or this? Was MS even coming up in the conversation?
So for me, it was, because I had a great aunt and also an uncle that have MS. And there are some genetic links. It's not like a sure thing, but there is, again, a correlation there. So that was what I suspected all along, not to mention Dr. Google. He's a scary doctor.
Yeah, the bedside manners aren't always great with Dr.
No,
Google.
it was like MS and also maybe death, right? It's basically you're dying. So I don't recommend Dr. Google. But that was on my radar. And the doctor even said, well, yeah, it kind of sounds like maybe, but I'm not seeing it. And eventually what happened, I was traveling for work. So I was out of town, a little over an hour away, not terribly far. But I was at this meeting, and at the end of the day, I stood up to try and walk away from where I had been all day. And when I stood up and tried to move my legs to walk, my legs just wouldn't work. And it felt like I had 100-pound bags on each leg. And so I could barely move at all. And I had gone to my hotel room to be like, maybe if I calm down and get myself together, this will go away. But it got worse when I was in the hotel room. And I was actually thinking, okay, I don't know what's happening, but this is super scary and I might die. That was actually going through my head. Like I could be dying right now. And I hadn't called 911 or anything, because I'd already been to the hospital probably 4 times in the last 2 to 3 months. And they'd turn me away saying, hey, it's an ER. You don't have anything broken, anything. There's nothing we can do for you. So they'd turn me away and say, go follow up with your doctor. And so I left my hotel room and went to the hotel lobby thinking, at least if I die, other people are going to see me and they'll call my family, instead of my family saying, hey, Dad just fell off the face of the earth. No one knows where he is. And somebody from my work that was there at the time saw me and said, you look awful. I said, yeah, I feel awful. And he said, we're taking you to the hospital. Come on. And thankfully, when I got to this hospital out of town, they said, look, we can't diagnose you or anything in the ER, but would you like us to admit you? Because then we can have a neurologist check you out and maybe you'll get some answers from that. And sure enough, after 5 days in the hospital and getting a full body MRI and a spinal tap, they said, yep, you've got MS. It should have been caught by your previous MRIs, but for whatever reason, it wasn't. But that's definitely what you've got. And from there, started on the path to treatment, which, by the way, if your listeners aren't very familiar with MS, there are over 20 treatments that exist today, but none of them are actually a cure. There's not currently a treatment that reverses the damage that's done to your nervous system.
Yeah, to explain it just for folks that might not know.
Yeah. So MS is when your immune system attacks your nervous system. So it does damage to, it's called the myelin sheath. That's the protective coating around your nerves. And what that does is it causes your, main electrical highway of your body, the source of communicating, across your entire body, not work correctly. So that's one of the reasons why MS is so difficult to diagnose, is because there are so many symptoms, and there's symptoms that are shared amongst other illnesses as well. And it'll even appear similarly on an MRI. They are lesions typically seen either in your brain or on your spinal cord that show up. But even that alone doesn't mean you have MS, because other diseases also include lesions as well. Even migraines can cause lesions. So getting an MS diagnosis is a bit challenging. Treatment does not actually cure you, right? My symptoms still come and go. And, there are ebbs and flows often tied to when I am stressed, not sleeping well, not eating well, things like that. I understand that now, but before being diagnosed, I didn't know how much my diet, for example, could impact my symptoms. It's a progressive illness. So all of the treatments that exist are really intended to prevent the disease from progressing any further.
Can it be stagnant? Can you basically keep it at bay, or is it going to progress no matter what at some point?
So maybe 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, the answer would have been, yeah, no matter what, it's going to progress to the point of it kind of taking over, right? And that's what happened to my great aunt. It used to be that the advice was, you need to be bedridden, because the more active you are, often you have more symptoms. People believed, well, symptoms mean I'm getting worse. Now we know that that's not the case. So you're starting to see the advice of be as active as you can, because that actually helps. It might not make you feel great. So for instance, in my case, sometimes the more I exercise, I'll start to get shaky, like twitches kind of throughout my body, or I'll go numb in certain areas of my body. I'll get blurred vision. And that was one of the reasons why before being diagnosed, I kind of stopped running, because all those things scared me. It was like, man, all these weird things are happening. Clearly I'm dying. I'm just going to not run anymore, because it must be terrible for me. And after talking with my neurologist, he said, no, be as active as you can, because that's going to help. That's what I've been focused on.
So I got to ask, as a dad of three, you had three at the time?
Yeah.
3 kids at the time? Like, I'm a dad of a couple, one third on the way. And I just, kids think I can do anything. I know I can't, but to them, what was that perspective? How did that feel, like having this vulnerability in this thing you couldn't control?
It's not something I think anyone would choose, to say, yeah, give me that. Right. But first off, congrats. You said you've got your third on the way. That's exciting. I hope you're good at zone defense, because that's, as a dad, that was one of the things that really hit me the hardest shortly after I was diagnosed. Once I got an appointment with my new neurologist, I asked him, hey, what's my prognosis look like? Can you tell me like what my future looks like? And he was very honest with me. He said, I can't predict what it's going to be for you, because MS really is different for everyone. So some people will have the exact same number and location of lesions as some other people, and half of those people are doing fine, the other half are not, right? So it's really difficult to predict. And he said, just based on my experience, seeing the amount of damage to your nervous system compared to other people similar to you, I would say you would be in a wheelchair within the next 5 years. And he did tell me, there are things you can do to minimize the chance of that happening. There's no silver bullet, but of course, be on your treatment for one. Two, diet, being as healthy as you can, do as much exercise as you can. And he said, science won't back me up on this, but I've seen it. He said, people that are optimistic, they tend to do the best. And so I thought, okay, I can do all of those things. Like I'm type A, like you're giving me things I can control. I'm going to do those to the nth degree. But as a father, my mind went to two things, I would say. One, I wanted to be able to walk my daughters down the aisle one day. And two, I have always been, and probably still will always be, the dad that says, I want to always kick my kids' butts at whatever sport it is that we're playing. If they're going to beat me, they're going to earn it. And so the prospect of both of those things possibly not happening anymore really, really hit me hard. And I was depressed for a couple of months after diagnosis. I mean, it's life-changing, right? It is. You've got this thing. It's not going away. There is no cure. And supposedly it is going to progress and progress and progress. And in my particular case, didn't look too good.
So 5 years, we're about there.
Little ways past the 4-year mark right now. So if there is a countdown clock going, we're running out of time. But I don't believe in that anymore. I mentioned earlier that, we all make decisions based on what we presume our future to hold. So at the time I was diagnosed, I thought also that my future was certain. Wheelchair, 5 years. And so what does that mean for the decisions that I make? I kind of started forfeiting life's plans. I don't think I can be president of a company anymore. I don't think that I can travel the world anymore. I got to start getting used to the idea that I'm not going to be able to kick my kids' butts in sports. All those things I started conceding. And then thankfully I had this epiphany of, wait a minute, why am I living my life as though those things are a certainty? And I'm already given up on them. Why am I not instead doing everything that I can to do what I can for as long as I can? And who knows, maybe that certain future of being in a wheelchair in 5 years isn't gonna be the case. And that's when I started setting goals for myself of getting back into running, of saying, man, it'd be really incredible if I could even just do a half marathon again one day, because once I had been diagnosed, I'd been out of running for so long. It was like starting from scratch, but not just from being out of shape, since I had been afraid to run, given everything that I was feeling, but also the symptoms that went along with running. I had to learn to adapt to and tolerate and build a tolerance for, as I kind of reprogressed from walking again to jogging to eventually I ran my first post-diagnosis half marathon. It was 8 months after getting diagnosed, and haven't stopped from there. And I've done much more and crazier things since then.
Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible. Hey folks, if you know me, you know that I love coffee and I need it to function, and that doesn't change when I'm on an adventure. In fact, I'm drinking some right now. And that's why I really enjoy the AeroPress Go Plus. You might have heard of AeroPress. It's this easy way, really, really convenient way to make some of the smoothest, almost velvety coffee with a full body finish, but in a very convenient, packable system that's perfect for travel, perfect for adventures, and really mess-free. I like French press at home because I like that full-bodied flavor, but it's really hard to replicate in a way that isn't really inconvenient when you're traveling. So this past weekend on our Swamp Drifters paddling adventure, I brought the AeroPress Go Plus with me, and I ended up making coffee for everybody, like 15 people. It's so cool. You put the grounds in, you put the water in, you take the plunger and you push it down right into the cup, and then you open the bottom filter, push the grounds out, and then just do a new one. It's it's mess free. It was super convenient, and it made really high quality coffee for everybody. And so we didn't have to stick with instant like we've done in the past. If you want to give it a shot, go to aeropress.com/ASP. That's AEROPRESS.com/ASP. You can also use the promo code ASP to save 20% off your order. That's aeropress.com/ASP and use the code ASP at checkout for 20% off. It's time to say goodbye to crappy coffee as you travel, as you adventure, and yes, to better adventures fueled by better coffee. We thank AeroPress for sponsoring our show. That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode. So tell me about that, because you've reached those accomplishments on either side of this diagnosis. Talk about the difference of completing a half marathon 8 months after being diagnosed versus presumably a year or two before. It had to be pretty dang satisfying.
When I finished that first half marathon after diagnosis, I mean, that was an emotional wreck in a good way, right? Because I had proven to myself, I felt, that my diagnosis did not have to change what it was that I was capable of doing. That set me off on this path of, well, why stop there? And so I then said, I'm no longer half crazy. I'm going to be fully crazy. And I made my next goal of completing a marathon within the next year. So I started working my way up towards that. And it was almost a year after my first half marathon that I completed my first ever marathon. So I'd never done more than a half marathon before being diagnosed, and had always thought of, running races as just something fun to do, not a big deal. And now it's become so much more to me, because it's me continually proving to myself, to my family, to my friends, and people out there that are struggling with whatever it is they're going through, that, hey, the odds may be stacked against you, but it doesn't mean that there's a certainty out there that things have to be terrible. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you, Mason, that, everybody can do what I've done either, because, that's not necessarily realistic. But I think what I've seen in some people is just the challenge. It can be so overwhelming to be dealt a big challenge, and people handle it one of a couple different ways. Some people live in denial, which I admittedly do to an extent. I think that helps me a little bit.
It's that positivity getting out of hand, right? Sometimes.
That's right. Some people instead kind of go the other way and say, this sucks and my life is over. And even having that mindset may prevent people from seeing, hey, there are things that you can do. And it might not be exactly what you had envisioned. It may not be perfect. It may not allow you to do exactly what your goal is. But something is better than nothing. Yet the negativity sometimes gets in the way of even seeing what's possible. It's just automatically, I can't. And for me, I've decided to try and surround myself as much as possible with positivity. In fact, after I kind of came out of my depression after being diagnosed, I was looking for a support group that I could get some positivity from. And every group that I joined was mostly good, but there was always somebody in the group that was like, this sucks and my life is over. And for me, that brought me right back to that negative space I was trying to stay out of. And so I said, none of these groups are for me. I'm going to start my own. And so I started a Facebook group called Running with MS. And it has mainly one rule, and that is it's all optimism, all the time. And there are people out there that may say, that sounds like toxic positivity. Sure, don't join. Right? I mean, so we've got 700 people from around the world in this group that are super positive, inspirational, encouraging people. And, it is a great place for those people that say, hey, I don't want to be around negativity. I just need the positivity. If I want negativity, I can go somewhere else for that.
Pretty much anywhere else. So
Right.
funny. I'm reading a book right now by there's this beautiful tower near our home. It looks like something out of Lord of the Rings called Bach Tower, and beautiful up on a hill, and gorgeous garden area. And for the longest time, their rule is no negativity in their messaging anywhere. So the moat around the tower, I mean, it looks medieval. It doesn't say no swimming. They worked it out with regulators to say swimming only allowable by waterfowl and fish. And so there's always a way to make something that's saying the same thing and getting the same message across fun and positive and actually kind of funny versus just saying, yes, we're going to put up this giant sign in front of this picturesque place for insurance purposes to say no swimming. No, waterfowl or swimming's available for waterfowl. And I'm like, how fun is that? And so are you naturally a positive person?
I would definitely say I have always tended towards optimism. I actually used to teach Dale Carnegie. I was a Dale Carnegie instructor for 12 years. And that class is really kind of based on self-confidence, positivity, optimism. So that's kind of naturally who I've been for a long time now, I would say.
And so you talked about that depression you went through. That's very much understandable, very much, I don't know if to be expected, but what do you think that's, something you did well in that time? It sounds like looking for a support group that was positive. What was a thing you did really well then? Was there anything else that you could share that you look back on and think, okay, that was the right way to handle that?
Definitely. So one, I will say that the depression piece, statistically, 50% of all people with MS will have depression at some point in their lives. So that's just talking about people with MS, right? But to your point, people that just experience the ebbs and flows of life. I'm so pleased to see that the narrative, at least out in the media, is no longer, hey, this is taboo. And I do actually talk about mental health frequently as well, because it needs to be normalized. It is a normal thing for people to struggle with difficult things in life, or from a really high to I don't know where I go from here. So in my case specifically, in addition to searching for support groups and eventually creating my own, I also was researching mental health professionals, and I tried multiple different ones until I found the right person for me, which is really important too. I think, if people are going to go down the path of talking to a therapist or, somebody in the mental health world, that you don't have to feel like, oh, I'm going to offend that person if we don't jive together, right? You need to continue to look until you find the right person. I happened to find an amazing therapist who specializes in dealing with patients that have MS. So her husband has MS, and I was able to find her through some of the resources at the National MS Society. And I decided, I even felt by the time I found her that I had gotten my depression under control. But I said, I want to be proactive about it. And so here we are 3.5 years after I found her, and we still meet almost monthly, sometimes schedule wise, it doesn't work. But I think that often, when it comes to physical exercise and diet, people are proactive if that's kind of what their goal is. And they say, yeah, I'm going to keep doing these things. But mental health is often, well, I'll deal with that once it's a problem. And it's something that I really believe that we've got to be proactive on also, because if you wait until it's a problem to deal with it, it's too late.
It's just like being in shape. It's really a proactive measure a lot of times, exercise. It's, yes, unless you're like bodybuilding like you are, you're building towards something. But a lot of times it is just like, if you want to get in shape after, like you gaining nearly 100 pounds after that phase, that's just that much more challenging to get to where you want to be.
Exactly. So yeah, I can't recommend enough the idea of being proactive when it comes to managing your mental health.
Run your first half 8 months after diagnosis. And now, you've run countless halves, multiple marathons. And talk to us about when you got fully crazy, you also started setting your goals even bigger. Tell us about what led to, is it just a natural progression to want to do an ultra after that? Like what or did you think, okay, that's as much as I want to do? And then, you usually post run, your mind starts getting crazy and thinking, well, what else can I do?
Yeah, I can honestly say, so that's been a mindset shift for me, is that there's no longer a limit to my craziness, which I think is great, right? After that first half marathon, it was, I want to do a marathon. And then after I did a marathon, it was like, why am I stopping at a marathon? I want to see what else I can do. I truly believe that if you set really high goals for yourself, then even if you don't achieve them, you're going to do so much more than you otherwise would have. So the bigger the goal, the bigger the effort, the bigger the gain. Shortly after kind of deciding I want to start training for a marathon, I came across this organization, MS Run the US. And I was scrolling through Instagram at the time, and I saw a post about it. And they're a team of relay runners that run from LA to New York every year to raise money and awareness for MS research and support for people living with MS. And so the team is 21 runners. Each runner takes a chunk of the US. And the relay starts in April and it ends in, I think it's early August. So everybody's basically running a marathon a day over 6 consecutive days. I mean, not every segment is the exact same length, but once I saw that then became the goal that I was anchored to, which, by the way, that was about 3 years ago. It was just after finishing my half marathon. So I was in the process of, okay, marathon's the next thing. But then when I saw this, I was like, ooh, that would be a great next thing. And that became my big goal of everything that I was working towards from a training perspective, was to prove to myself that I could do that. So eventually I ran one of the days of the relay with the runner that happened to be running through my area of Ohio. I just messaged him like a crazy Facebook stalker and said, hey, I know you don't know me, but I'm interested in doing this MS Run the US relay one day, and curious if you'd be open to having a running buddy for a day, just so I could get a feel for the organization and what it's like. And he said, sure. So guy's name was Tim. Awesome dude. We became, as you would, we became fast friends after running 7 hours together, running, I think it was 31 miles.
Either friends or enemies, one of the two. There's really no other option.
Exactly. Yeah, you learn real quick whether or not that's going to go well, right? So that was great. And that was kind of the first feather in my hat, so to speak, of, okay, I've run a marathon at this point. Actually, I'd run several at that point. Now I've done an ultra distance. I then also did the Dopey Challenge, which, if you're not familiar with that, that's 4 consecutive days of racing in Disney World, the 5K, 10K, half marathon, and full marathon. So that to me was another test of, doing consecutive days of putting a lot of stress on your body and getting no sleep, I should add as well. And then I did another ultra shortly thereafter, where it was a 12-hour ultra on a 3-mile loop course. So to me, that was not just about the endurance, but also the mental toughness of seeing the same thing over and over and over. And if you can keep it together and, still be on your feet by the end of that, that's another confidence builder for me. And so all those things led to my confidence in, okay, I want to actually do this. And I applied to be one of the runners for this year's MS Run the US Relay, and thankfully got accepted, which, they do narrow it down. There are more than 21 people that apply every year. So more than 21 people crazy enough to want to do 6 consecutive days of a marathon a day. And in June, I'll be running from Lincoln, Nebraska to Casey, Iowa, which is 145 miles over the course of 6 days. So for me, slightly less than a marathon a day, 25 miles a day for 6 consecutive days. And I'm super excited for it. And it's an awesome cause. I've met so many people in the MS community that are inspired by the organization to see that, so many good things are happening to further research and to support people living with MS. And one of the cool things on this year's team, we actually have 3 runners that actually have MS. So many of the people have some kind of tie to MS. Mom has it, brother has it, spouse has it, that kind of thing. And there are 3 of us actually that have MS also, which I think is, it's already inspirational to see people take on such a immense challenge. I really think that when people see, wow, someone with my disease is actually doing something crazy, that can really provide a lot of hope and inspiration too.
Gosh, I imagine you didn't see yourself doing this when you first got diagnosed. I imagine a lot of people didn't. You're setting your goals crazier and crazier. What do you think is most different about you now prior to that news you got in 2019? And I'm not going to say better or worse. What's the most different?
I embrace things a lot more readily today. There's a phrase that sounds a little negative, but it's not really. It's a phrase that a lot of athletes utter over time, and that is embrace the suck. And that is somewhat what has changed for me. Of like, hey, if there's nothing I can do about it, then I need to figure out how to roll with it. Before being diagnosed, I would say, my mindset was a little bit like, maybe I'd complain about it, feel bad for myself, whatever. And now I actually tell people that I've adopted the Captain America mindset of I can do this all day. And that started when I started going in for infusions. I thought, hey, this is going to be a little scary for my kids to understand what's going on, seeing an IV in my arm for a couple hours. And, you don't look so hot going through something like that. So I said, how can I make this a positive thing? So I dressed up as Captain America to go to the clinic where I got my infusions. And now they expect it. I go in every 6 months and they're like, hey, Captain America's back. They'd be disappointed if I don't show up as Captain America. And part of that, though, is I tell my kids it's my super soldier serum. And whatever challenges I have, I can handle it. Whatever life throws at us, we can get through it is really the message I try to put out there, for my kids, for my friends, my family. So that's been the biggest shift. I will say I'm thankful, as weird as it sounds, because it's not a disease I'd recommend, 0 out of 10.
What disease would you recommend?
Right. Exactly. Not too many. So that being said, I'm thankful because it really did make me evaluate my own purpose, my own mindset, this whole concept of, my future was never guaranteed in the first place. And even once I was diagnosed, 5 years from now, I'm going to be in a wheelchair. Yeah. And I could also get struck by lightning tomorrow, right? I mean, there's still no certainty. So instead, thinking about, well, what is it that I can do today? And it's not that I don't think about tomorrow. No, it's what can I do to position myself as best as possible for tomorrow? It's not certain either, but just because it isn't certain doesn't mean I do nothing. Instead, I move forward the best I can.
Who do you look at? Is there anybody in your life or someone that you are not personally connected to? Maybe it's celebrity or something that really gives you a lot of inspiration on this journey.
So there are actually a lot of people. I mentioned my group that I started, and so many incredibly inspirational people there. I mean, honestly, I started the group thinking maybe I can inspire other people. And selfishly, now I'm the one getting inspired by other people. um, the person I'd say that came to mind immediately when you asked was my friend Colin, who I got to know through this group. His name is Colin. He lives in Northern Ireland, and we are like twins. It feels like our birthdays are literally 2 weeks apart. We got diagnosed right around the same time. We're on the same treatment, and we have like one brain where we think the same way about everything. Every challenge is an opportunity. There's no challenge that is too big to try and take on. And if you fail, great. Failing is learning, all these things. And we push each other. And this is a guy, by the way, who I only met because I have MS and he has MS. And he happened to stumble upon our group and we just clicked. So literally, guy I've never met in person. We've been good friends for 2.5 years now and message each other pretty much daily. I'd consider him one of my closest friends, which is crazy to think about, but so awesome to think about too. You think about of all the bad things in the world that can happen to people, wow, how much good can actually come out of it as well. In my case, I've been beyond blessed. It's incredible.
People, I live in Florida and we get a lot of hurricanes and people are like, doesn't that just like scare you to death to live there? And I said, yes, unless you've gone through them. But every time a hurricane approaches, I always say, well, I'm looking forward to reconnecting with my neighbors because that's what forces us all to work together, to clear a road, to clear driveways, to basically to meet sometimes for the first time. And then we have a relationship. And it is through disaster, through disease, through challenges, pandemics and attack, all sorts of awful things bring out sometimes the only time we see the best of society. So if you can keep that in mind and look forward to that and look for those opportunities, it can really get you through those hard things. And this is just what a great example. One of your best friends you met through this that you would have never met otherwise. And it's brought out so much good in you. I always ask this too of folks who go through something like this. What do you say to people who haven't had this kind of life-changing moment or experience, but also want to make a change? What do you think you could have done differently had you not been diagnosed to make the changes you want to make in life?
I think it shouldn't have to take a life-changing diagnosis for anyone to think about what matters most to them. I think it's easy to take those things for granted when there's nothing looming, there's nothing that is like in your face wrong with you, with your life, your situation, whatever. And in my case, I took stock in what mattered most once I thought that my future was drastically different from what I assumed it was going to be. So for anyone to actually take a look in the mirror and say, hey, what really matters to me? What are the reasons I want to stay healthy in my life? And if it is a superficial reason, it's not likely going to be something that motivates you on the difficult days to keep working at your goals. But if it's something super meaningful, for me, it's to really be the best dad and husband I can be for as long as I can be. That's something that is at the core of who I am. So even on my difficult days, on the days my body's not cooperating with me, on the days where I'm just stressed out, I've had it, I don't feel like doing anything. Having that super meaningful purpose behind everything I do, that's what gets me out the door and training and putting in all the work, no matter what. And you don't have to be diagnosed with the disease to understand your purpose. It just takes the self-evaluation for you to really ask yourself those questions and figure out what really matters to you.
Matthew, that's awesome. Could I ask you some rapid fire questions?
Yeah, love it.
So, and I'll tie in some of my other questions with these, but what are you most curious about right now? Could be just a topic, could be anything. Is there a curiosity that's really kind of grabbed you recently?
Curiosity. I'd say the limits of my own craziness. That's one area of curiosity.
Aren't we all curious about that?
Yeah, I mean, people are already asking me like, what comes next after this relay? I mean, it's not like I'm hanging up the shoes and I'm retiring, right? So it's like, what's next? And so there's that curiosity there, and I may have answered that question a bit for myself already, but I haven't publicly answered it yet. So I'll keep that close to the vest for now. But
well, I've got my next question, it wasn't next, but I'll move it, is biggest goal not yet achieved. I think on the horizon is this run across Iowa and Nebraska coming up in June. But beyond that, is there something you want to achieve, or is it too early to talk about?
I don't think it's too early. So I'll put this out there, and I hope I don't get in trouble for this. My wife is aware of this, by the way, so that's important. If I were surprising her with this,
biggest layer of approval there.
So the next big thing, right? Which it feels weird to say, but what could be bigger? It is running the length of Ireland with my buddy Colin, and actually his brother Andrew as well. They're running buddies. The shirt I'm wearing, since your listeners are visual people, says Idiots Go Running. That's their podcast. I hope it's okay for me to mention that. But it's two idiot brothers, and we use that term in an endearing way, figuring out how to run crazy distances together. And so Colin set out to run the length of Ireland a couple years back, and learned through that process that he had a lot to figure out about how to run super long distances. So the run goes, I guess you could do it in either direction, but starting at the southern tip of Ireland, going to the northern tip, it's about 350 miles. So putting that in the context of me running 145 miles in 6 days, it's a little more than double, but it's something that Colin and I have talked about, and his brother Andrew, about what a great way we've established this friendship from across the pond and talk all the time. What a great way to spend some time doing something crazy together. So that's the next kind of big bucket list thing that we're thinking about for maybe 2-ish years from now.
That would be incredible. As you go towards these crazy goals that I continue, even if you did this Ireland run, I mean, if that's a few years out, you got a lot more years of doing crazy stuff. So I don't think it's going to stop there. So as you pursue these wild goals, what's a daily habit that you stick to that you really try to not compromise on?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things that just boil down to discipline. So silly as it sounds, doing one Sudoku a day. Weird, I know, right? But actually part of MS is having cognitive challenges as well. So that's me staying sharp. Similarly, doing one Duolingo Spanish lesson a day. I went to school for Spanish, so trying to stay up on that all the time. Doing something to benefit my physical health every day, and being very intentional about what that is. I actually struggle when there's not a plan. So, a lot of times when you're training for something afterwards, it's like there's this recovery and rest period, and I go crazy during that. So it is being very intentional about what are the things I'm going to do today to benefit myself physically. And sometimes that is even the mental health aspect of it, knowing the toll that takes physically as well. So prayer, meditation, those things, but always ensuring that there's at least one thing every day that I'm doing to make sure I'm taking care of myself.
Do you have a favorite Athletic Brewing non-alcoholic beer?
It's kind of like, which is your favorite child?
Yeah.
It's like,
I mean, I have one, but
yeah, you don't want to say it out loud, right? But no, I don't have a favorite child. That goes moment to moment. But it's kind of the same, with athletic beer, right? It's what am I in the mood for? I love that there are so many different, depending on what the mood is. But I'm a huge fan of the Goza. So good. And then Trailblazer, which is, a seasonal, obviously. But man, I love after a long run, having that cold and ready. Whew, that is awesome.
That's two good ones right there. My wife is a big Goza fan, and so on each can it used to say "brew without compromise," but what we realized is our community was filled with people not only doing one thing without compromise, but really living without compromise, and people like you that are facing life's challenges in a way that's really inspiring, very positive, very optimistic, but also realizing, okay, I can't just be optimistic and positive in this part of life. It kind of takes being that way. What does it mean to you to live without compromise?
I talked earlier about forfeiting my goals and accepting kind of the negative potential that was in front of me as a certainty. So living without compromise means not conceding to any negative potential and embracing everything that you have in the moment to do everything you can to live the kind of life that you can live. So if you go to www.mattruns4ms.com, that's mattruns4ms.com. There you're going to find several different links to other things. The first being a link all about the relay run that I'm doing, my segment and my fundraising goals, all of that stuff there. And then also I've got a blog. I've got links to Instagram, the Facebook group that I mentioned, and a couple of other things as well. So definitely worth checking out.
Awesome. All that will be linked in the show notes. And for real this time, I'll let you go. Man, thank you so much.
It. Yeah, thank you, Mason.
This was awesome.
I really, really appreciate it. All right. Well, you have a great rest of your day.
You too. All right. We'll talk soon. All right. See you. Bye.
Bye.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to the show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.